Everyone's very quiet today. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are audible.
All right, great. So we are now at the topic of Vyashti Vichara. What is this Jivatma? What is it composed of? So I hope you remember we did what is Atma and what is Anatma, right? Atma was the absolute reality, the consciousness principle, and Anatma or Mithya was the dependent reality, that which is dependent on Atma, doesn't have it cannot exist by itself, like a pot cannot exist without the clay. And the student asked, what is Atma? And to answer that, we are looking at a different number of ways of figuring that out. And part of that question, the unasked question was, what is Anatma? So the author is relying on explaining what all Atma is not, right, as the first method of conveying what is Atma. And among all the things Atma is not, it was the three bodies. So the gross body that you're looking at right now, and all it is, Atma is not that. This gross body is Anatma. And also the subtle body, that is the Sukshma Shareeram, is also not Atma. So we're currently on the second of the two bodies, the Sukshma Shareeram, which Atma is not. And we said this subtle body has various components, Saptakala Bihi, 17 components that it has. So we're studying what those 17 components are. And in the last class, we looked at the 5 Jnanendriyas, the 5 organs of knowledge, which are part of the subtle body. So which is the power behind our sense of sight, touch, smell, and so on. And the organs of action, the power behind our power to grasp things, locomotion, and all that. And now we're coming to the third set of 5, which is the Pancha Prana, which are also part of our subtle body. So let's look at what those are. So our Pancha Prana, or also alternatively known as Panchavayu, are these 5. You might have also seen this if you're doing any kind of yogic studies. So the first prana is the respiratory system. It's called pranaha, and respiration, it's an upward moving force. So I think everyone knows what is respiration, this breath that we take in and it fuels this body, right? And the second one is apanaha, the evacuation system. So it's a downward moving force. So actually, if sometimes you see prana and apana, you can also, because it's the upward moving force, you can think of it as exhalation, and apana, because it's the downward moving force, you can think it of as inhalation. This is in another context, and you will find that it is directly opposed to what is said in Yoga Sutras, but we have some minor contradictions like that in Vedanta and Yoga Sutras. But anyway, so in here, apana is the downward moving force. It's the evacuation system. So it is the power which fuels the excretion, the menstruation for women, and even childbirth. So this is the energy which is responsible for all that. Vyanaha is the circulatory system. So this beautiful prana, how it fuels our entire body, this prana going to our various vital organs, fueling them. All this happens through our circulatory system. So that is the Vyanaha energy, which is responsible for that. So as I'm talking of all these, you would also realize that where certain of these principles might be used. If you've been to an Ayurvedic doctor, they might tell you your samana, what we're talking about next, is a bit weak, right? Which means your digestive fire is weak. So to keep the digestion going well, the samana has to be working well. If you're having some menstruation problems, there might be a problem with your apana vayu. So these concepts come up in different places, even practical reasons. So we are doing it just to understand what is anatma right now. And finally, the fifth vayuhu or pranaha is udanaha, which is the emergency system. So when some dirt into your eyes water, or when a fly goes up your nose, you sneeze. If you consume some toxins or some food which is not great for you, you might vomit, right? So all this is thanks to the udana vayu. So a slight digression, not really Vedanta, but interesting to know is there are several kinds of tears, right? So there are these reflex tears, and there are these continuous tears, according to science, not Vedanta, which continuous tears is what keeps your eyes moist. Reflex tears is what happens, kind of what we're talking about in the emergency system here, Udana, where something goes into your eyes water. But there is also these tears which happen when you're overwhelmed with feelings, right? Like especially negative feelings, you cry. And when you look at the composition of these tears, it's very different. The other two kinds of tears are almost 98% just water. But these tears you have when you're overwhelmed with feelings, on examining them, they find that there is a lot of toxins which are there. And this process of crying also releases these feel-good hormones of endorphins and oxytocin. So that's just to say, if someone's crying because they're overwhelmed, you should never tell them to not cry, right? So even that overwhelming of feelings that you have when you cry, that would also be part of the udana, right? So then how many have we finished? Sort of the 17, we finished with 15, right? So in some text, it says the subtle body, Sukshma Shareeram, is made up of 19 elements, which if we include the last two on this page. In some other texts, like Tattva Bodha, it says there are 17 elements. It's a minor thing because you can actually put these as part of the first two. I will explain how. So the 16th one is manaha, which means the mind. And the 17th one is buddhi, which means the intellect. So there is a slight differentiation that Vedanta makes here for us. Mind being the emotional part, you can think of it as, and buddhi being the intellect part. So in some texts, manaha is described as sankalpa vikalpa manaha. Sankalpa vikalpa means the oscillation, the continuous oscillation function of the mind. Do I do this or do I do that? Do I have bread for breakfast or do I have dosa? Do I take this path or that path? So our mind is constantly oscillating between these various choices, right? So this is the function of mana. But when you have decided, this is the path I'm going to take, this is what I will order for breakfast, that's the function of intellect, buddhi, which is why it says the definition for buddhi is nishchayatmakam buddhi, which means nishchaya means without doubt. I have decided that this is what I'm going to do. That is function of buddhi. So in the other texts, which mention 19, they also talk about chittam, which is the memory faculty. This is the storehouse of all our memories. Could be not just this life, but even past lives. Because if you remember, we said the subtle body survives beyond this one lifetime, right? So it is the physical body, Sthula Shariram, has a limited period of surviving from date of birth to date of death. But for your subtle body, carries with you through lifetimes, which is why you, across lifetimes, You might have some of the same personality traits. You have the same karma that you have to deal with. And whatever karma is accumulated in this life, it again goes into this storehouse. And then I'm not talking about the Chittam storehouse, but it goes into your Sanchita storehouse. And it's available for later lives, right? Whatever. So that's how it survives, because your subtle body travels with you from life to life. So there might be certain dreams you have sometimes which are seem to be memories beyond this lifetime. So that's how this is also possible. So Chittam is the memory faculty. And if we're just talking about the 17, we can just, if the memory is to do with an emotion, you can put it as part of manaha. If the memory is to just do with the fact, I ate a banana for breakfast this morning, that can be part of buddhi, right? So that's chittam. And finally, when there is 19, there is ahamkara, the I notion. So Vedanta tells us, aham is the truth. I am is the truth. And everything else that you attach after that, I am a woman, I am a man, I am, a doctor, I'm a teacher, whatever else you attach, all that is the mithya bit. That is all superimpositions that you are adding onto the I am, right? So that is this false notion of what I am. This I notion is ahamkara. So it's loosely translated as ego, but again, this is why it is important for us to know what ahamkara itself means, because ego has so many connotations, right? So when you say someone's egoistic, we mean they think too much of themselves. Even in Hindi, we say ahamkara, or some other regional languages, we say ahamkara. We again mean it in the egoistic sense. But this, you need to understand ahamkara as the I notion. And this false I notion is what we are trying to drop, what we're trying to get rid of through all this study of Vedanta. Right. So with this, we finish the 17 or 19 components of the subtle body. Any questions in this?
Yes, Vandanaji.
Yes.
Wanted to know, you told that during pralaya or during moksha, the subtle body gets dissolved.
Right.
So I wanted to know, along with that, all the karmas of the body will also get dissolved?
No, because we said, I explained further what exactly we mean by the dissolution of the subtle body, right? So at the time of pralayam, which is the cosmic destruction of the universe, when we say the subtle body is resolved, it means it just goes to an unmanifest state, right? So it's everything. So even in cosmology, they talk about this point of singularity, where nothing is differentiated. Actually, we'll talk more about it now when we're talking about the third body. But it all goes back into an unmanifest state, in an undifferentiated state. So the subtle body also goes back into this undifferentiated state, in the sense that it all merges and it doesn't have any scope of attaching to a physical body anymore. But when their creation comes back, how many ever subtle bodies were there in the previous creation will come back again. Right? So that's what we mean by resolution.
Along with the karmas.
Along with the karmas intact. So otherwise, you just have to wait 4.3 billion years and you would get automatic moksha. That's not the case, unfortunately. There is only one way to get moksha, is through jnanam, through knowledge. And when I said it resolves at the time of moksha, at the time of liberation, when you drop the ignorance or this wrong notion of who I am and understand who I truly am, at that time when we say subtle body is destroyed, it's again, it merges with the cosmic subtle body. You can think of it like that. So in the sense that, who am I? I am the absolute. I am the whole consciousness. So when I'm no longer attached with this karma and this body, I know I'm not Spandana, I'm the absolute consciousness. Who am I? I am Brahman. I am that absolute consciousness. I am everything. So that, in that sense, it's destroyed in that sense, because with that knowledge, I cannot have any rebirth anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Spanjananji.
Thank you.
I just have to make a point that when you spoke of Chittam just now,
Yes.
all this what we hear now of the past life regression therapy, so it is sort of based on this kind of a principle.
Past life regression is not really from Vedanta, so I am not an expert. I would not comment on it. But all I would say is, thank God we don't remember everything, right? So even if you remembered everything that you did in this lifetime, there would be so much trauma to carry. There would be just so much unnecessary information to carry, maybe so much shame, guilt, so much, right? Why do you really want to know about what happened in, again, this is my personal opinion. Is it really useful to know what happened in your past life in particular sense? In the sense that, because this is again where Vedanta will differ a bit from, or yogic sciences will differ a bit from the psychology perspective. Of course, even the latest, some of the latest levels of psychology don't talk about this, but one of the previous layers of psychology used to talk about this talk therapy, trying to identify your trauma and then overcoming each trauma, right? But instead, another way to address it is I forget which, yeah, I think it was Maharishi who spoke about this. It's who's also Vedantian from a different lineage. He said that if you have like a tree, which with rotting leaves, is it better for the farmer to check each leaf and try to correct the problem with each leaf? Or is it instead better to address the root and nourish the root so the entire tree can be nourished, right? So Vedanta or yoga often takes that view. If there is trauma in the mind, you increase, this is the words of one of the great Vedantian called David Frawley, you increase the digestive fire of the mind, right? So, and thereby all issues can be resolved. Because even if you can remember through past life regression one particular trauma, but and it might be interesting, how do you know that, say, the current trauma you're facing is from that particular time? So for example, if, say, you remember, I lost my mother very young when I was a child in my past life, and hence I have a trauma, right? It could be partly related to that, but how many countless losses have you faced across lifetimes, right? So it's not just one particular trauma which might be giving you the vasanas you have today. It's your memories across several lifetimes. And so that's my personal take. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. No, I'm just amazed because to think of something like this, a concept like this, which is already there since such olden times, and now it has relevance. That's what.
So in Vedanta, we always focus on, so we're studying all this. Why? To know this is anatma. This is what I'm not. So I carry all these. So just like, don't create even further associations, right? So we already have these associations from this lifetime that we're trying to drop. So there's no point adding even further association. I was like a king in this past life, or something else like that, you know? So this is all anatma. That's the main thing to remember as we are studying all this. It's interesting and useful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question, Spandanaji. So you don't think that knowing about all the previous lives actually can help to work on solving issues in this current life?
Like I said, this is my personal opinion. I'm not an expert on the subject, but the yogic philosophy is that instead of spending so much time and energy trying to reveal, one particular trauma from a past life or even this life. So even when you talk about this life, there is so many things which happened to us before we had a capacity to even remember. So there is also kind of womb regression. They do trauma you encountered when you were in the womb, right? And it's probably all added to that for sure. But we are talking about millions of lifetime. So identifying a memory or a trauma from one particular life, how useful is it going to be in the long run? For sometimes for small things, it could be, like someone has a really deep fear of water and it's because they drowned maybe in some life. So I think in past life regression, they deal with things like that. But think of that tree. You can spend your whole lifetime trying to deal with one rotten leaf at a time. But you have limited time in this life, right? So instead, you can spend your energy nourishing the root. That's the Vedantic or yogic perspective, that instead of, if you just nourish the whole tree from the root, then everything else will drop off anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's continue. So we finished 2 bodies out of...
Yes, ma'am, Fundamental. I wanted to ask
Yes.
how this chitta in chitta and ahankar and the chitta in Satchitananda is different.
Oh, completely different, yes.
How?
It means completely different things. It's not... Sanskrit is, first of all, it's chitta and chit, right? So it's different words, but sometimes even when you find different same word in Sanskrit, Sanskrit is very contextual. You have to take it as per the context. But in this case, the word itself is completely different. It's chitta and it's chit. Yeah.
Thank you, Spandana.
So now coming to the third of the 3 bodies, which again, I am not, right? It is so let's chant on your page 9. You can unmute yourself. Karana shariram kim anirvachaya anadi vidyarupam shariradvayasya कारणमात्रं सत्स्वरूप अज्ञानम् निर्विकल्पकरूपम् यदस्ति तत्कारणशरीरम् Thank you. So it says, the author starts with saying anirvachaniya. It is hard to describe, right? It is the nature of, so anirvachaniya anadi avidya rupam. It is the nature of indefinable, beginningless avidya. So there is a forewarning that it is something a bit hard to describe. And anadi means beginningless. It was always there. There was no beginning because of which this karana shariram started. So that there is no beginning to Karana Shariram is the causal body, the cause, Karana Matra, merely the cause of Sharira Dvayasya, of the two bodies, the gross body and the subtle body that we just talked of, right? Rupa means it is the nature of or form of. Sat Swarupa Jnanam, and it is responsible for the ignorance of one's own nature. Nirvikalpaka Rupam, it is the form of undifferentiated. So we will talk more about this. Yadasti, which is Tat, that is Karana Shariram. That is the causal body. So that's it starts with saying it's beginningless, right? So that is the one question that many of us have, that I know it'll come up at some point, so I might as well answer it, that why all this, right? Why am I born? Why do I have to go through this life? Why have I forgotten my true nature? That is the one why which cannot be answered, because there is no start. So it is by beginningless, it means there was never a starting point. The why can only be if there was a starting point. You cannot say because of this that happened. This was always there. Brahman was always there. Maya was always there. Both are anadi. Both are beginningless. So that is the one why which cannot really be answered at some point, but it's probably only the jnanis who understand the why, but it stops. It's no longer important at that point, right? So what is the function of this Karana Shariram? To understand this function, we have to recall an important law of creation. It is important in scriptures, and modern science accepts it too, which is that nothing can be created. The law of conservation of matter tells us that matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. So when we talked about the creation of a pot, the potter didn't really create anything. The pot was already existing in the form of clay. And so nothing got added to the clay. It's the clay only got modified. It got given a shape and a form and a name, an amarupa, which made it into the pot. So this transformation from one form to another, this transformation is falsely called creation. So everything which exists in creation today, we can see that has always existed either in manifested form or an unmanifested form. A wooden table, for example, today existed as a piece of wood. And before the piece of wood came to be, it existed as a tree. Before the tree came to be, there was a seed, right? And the seed came from somewhere. So it's all a transformation. Same with this human body. Before the baby was born, it existed as a fetus. Before the fetus came to be, it existed as the embryo. And before that, as the sperm and egg of the father and mother. And that too came from somewhere else, right? So when this table is destroyed or the body dies, one may burn them and turn them into ash. This ash will mix with earth, and from there something new is born again. So there's this constant transformation which always happens in nature. But nothing is ever created from nothing, right? So similarly, it's the same for the Sthula Shariram and the Sukshma Shariram, the gross and the subtle bodies. Before they came into existence, they must have existed in another form. And after Pralayam, after the cosmic dissolution of the universe, they will go back to an unmanifest form. This unmanifest seed form we refer to as the Karana Shariram. So even scientists studying cosmology, they talk about Big Bang, that the universe started from a single point and it expanded to what it is now, and it is still expanding, they say. this point before this universe came to be, they call singularity. And in Vedanta, we call it avyaktam, the unmanifest. So when we talk about the cosmic dissolution of the universe, pralayam, the universe is simply going from the manifest form to the unmanifest form. So the author says that this is the karanam, the cause of these two karyams, the products, which are the stula and sukshma shariram. So what is this, the cycle of manifestation to unmanifestation, we falsely call creation and destruction, Shrishti and Pralayam, right? So everything is just simply a changing of form. So Vedanta always told us that this creation is cyclical. So the world did not start with the Big Bang. It was just another cycle of creation. Actually, interestingly enough, even many scientists today are exploring this concept. One of them is Roger Penrose, a 2020 Nobel laureate for his work in physics. He has a theory which is often not accepted by the whole scientific community, that the creation did not start with the Big Bang. There is evidence of previous universe which can be observed in when you study the black holes. And this he calls this theory the theory of conformal cyclical cosmology. It talks of infinite cycles surrounding the universe and the Big Bang. So I'm merely mentioning this because it's an interesting fact, and an appreciation of cosmology is very useful for a Vedantic student to appreciate the sheer magnitude of what we're talking about. However, as we said before, we don't look for science for proof of Vedas says, because Vedas is pramanam, is by itself, is self-valid by itself. Moreover, scientific views, as we know, keep changing over time. Science will not be able to disprove anything that is said in the Vedas, because this knowledge is timeless. So moving on, what is the condition of this karana shariram, this causal body? The author says, nirvikalpa karupam. Nirvikalpa, vikalpa is differences, and nirvikalpa means undifferentiated. It is of an undifferentiated form. So if you see two seeds of a mango plant, they might look exactly identical, but they might go on to give very different mango trees. One is with the same conditions. Maybe one will grow to be this big tree giving hundreds of fruit a year, and one will be a bit of a weak tree giving not so juicy fruits, right? But as seeds, they might look quite identical to the naked eye and not differentiated at all. So this causal body is the same. It in the seed form, it is undifferentiated. The various parts are not recognizable. There are not even just recognizable. There are no differences in that seed form. The stula shariram is very clear, right? So you can see my physical body. You can see what kind of hair I have, what color is my skin, and so on. The subtle body is also perceptible, but less so. So mind, which is part of the subtle body, you cannot see what's happening in my mind, and I cannot see what's happening in yours, but the mind is known to myself. So it is partially knowable. But when we come to the causal body, it's complete blankness. There's nothing to be known, because to know, there must also be a knower and the object to be known. So even that requires duality, that requires multiplicity, which doesn't exist. So it's completely unknowable. You can think of it like the deep sleep state. So similar to this seeds that we talked about of the the mango plant, it's same with an embryo, right? So an embryo in the very initial stages, you cannot really, even the doctor will not be able to tell you, will this be a boy or will this be a girl? But, and that is the condition of Karna Shariram. Everything is written in that embryo already. If, with the genetic mapping, it's possible today for that DNA to even give you potential for various diseases like Down syndrome, Parkinson's, and so on. What color of the eyes and hair will be, and even baldness is predictable, all from that embryo. That's what Vedanta says. It was always, this information was always there, right? It just is currently in an unmanifest form. It's only when it manifests we get to know all these things. So before creation and after resolution of the universe, it'll be Karna Shariram alone. So where no division is possible, no subject-object duality is recognizable, no mind, no sense organs. Hence, we cannot even talk about any form of knowledge. Hence, it is also called Sat Swarupa Jnanam, state of ignorance of one's real nature, ignorance about everything, really. So even cosmologists have been trying to understand what has happened before Big Bang, which they call singularity. They also call it a state of no information. It is anirvachaniyam. Now, this word anirvachaniyam is a technical word for mithya or maya, which means it cannot be categorized as sat nor asat. Sat, which we said what is Brahman in Satchitananda, Sat is absolute existence, right? Absolute undifferentiated existence, but it cannot be experienced through any objective experience, right? You can never have, if you're waiting for an experience of Brahman, you will always be disappointed because it cannot be experienced, not even in your highest states of samadhi. Because in that also there is no differentiated states. And asat means absolute non-existence. And it also cannot be experienced. So asat, absolute non-experience would be if I say the horn of a rabbit. The rabbit, we know, does not have any horns. You'll never be able to experience the horn of a rabbit. So that would be asat. So this anirvachaniyam, this mithya, is something in between. It's something like a dream. You cannot say the dream doesn't exist because you experienced it. Neither can you say it absolutely exists because you wouldn't be able to shake it off on waking up. Therefore, the dream is something in between. So this is just an analogy I'm using, yeah? So Shastra tells us that it's not only dreams that are in between, but everything else also that we're experiencing right now. This in-between state is anirvachaniyam. Some Vedanta books you might find anirvachaniyam being called inexplicable. That's not exactly correct, because if it was inexplicable, there would not be much point of talking about it and the discussion ends there. But we have to understand this instead as the in-between state, that it cannot categorically be said to be real nor unreal. Maya does not absolutely exist, but it is experienced all the time. You're seeing this illusion of me on the screen right now, right? Which is experiencing me as different from you. You're seeing maybe the trees behind me, and you're experiencing this as different from you. So it's experienced all the time, but it doesn't absolutely exist. It does not belong to that absolute level of reality. And it is not existence, and it hence cannot be negated that way either. So the famous example of Raju Sarpa, the snake rope that we give often in Vedanta. I can recall this example for you. A person is walking in twilight and dim light, and they see a rope, right? And but because the light is dim, they see the coiled rope and they mistake it for a snake. And a fear is generated and they get scared. But just then the light turns, the sun rises, and they can now see the rope more clearly, and they see it for what it is, the rope, and the fear goes away, right? And so where was the rope? It was right where the snake was, right? It was just this, there was this mistaken projection on the rope of it being a snake. And what needed to change for the rope to become snake? Nothing. The light came and ignorance about the real nature of the rope was removed. So that's the same we're talking about. So this Maya we experience all the time. We just need to shine the light of knowledge on it to remove its effect, right? So the person is still seeing the rope, but the projection is removed. So when ignorance is removed by the light of knowledge, you will still see everything. So we say Maya has two forces. It has the force of vealing, which veils us from the true nature, and it has the force of projection, which projects all this universe that we see. So when ignorance is removed, the vealing power of Maya is removed, but the projecting power continues. So you will still see this universe, you will still see the trees, you will still see different people, be able to have interactions with them. It's just that the ignorance of what is the true nature of everything is removed, and with that, suffering gets removed. And it says also anadi avidya rupam, right? So we spoke about this already. So avidya rupam, it is the form of ignorance, and it is anadi, beginningless. And this avidya, why have I forgotten my true nature? This self-ignorance, unfortunately, it doesn't have a beginning. This avidya, ignorance always was there. If ignorance was not there before, it's saying that knowledge was there, right? If knowledge was there, how can ignorance begin? So we say it's beginningless. However, it can come to an end. That's the good news. And it can come through an end through knowledge. So while it is beginningless, it is not permanent. Hence, we call it mithya, right? So there are two anadis here that we spoke of. So mithya is also anadi, and Brahman is also anadi. While mithya, or at least the effect of mithya, can come to an end, Brahman will never end. Brahman is the only permanent. So that's how we reconcile how both can be anadi, but one is permanent. So Karana Shariram can be equated to spiritual ignorance, the ignorance of my true nature. As long as ignorance, avidya exists, Karana Shariram exists. At the time of moksha, there is nothing other than the removal of avidya or ignorance. Karana Shariram is destroyed. Again, you have to think of his destruction as the wave merging into the water. So is the wave in the ocean destroyed when it ends? That name and form of the wave has ended, but it is merged into the totality. The wave realizes that it is nothing but water and drops the mistaken identity. That's moksha. So this avidya can have an end. And finally, what is the cause of the Karana Shariram? In all the bodies we were looking at this, right? The question itself is wrong, because by definition, Karana Shariram is the cause only, the author tells us. And it is not a product, it is not born of anything. It is, there cannot be any cause for it because it's beginningless. Other names you will hear of Karana Shariram are avidya, which meaning ignorance, Mula Vidya, meaning the root ignorance. At the Samashti level, it is also known as Maya. Samashti level meaning that the cosmic level is also known as Maya, Prakriti, Shakti, and so on. So it's not the easiest concept to digest. So I'm sure there are questions. I will take some. If you feel you've not understood Maya, that is great, because if you think you have understood it, you've definitely not understood it. It's something like quantum physics. Right, so the physical body was easy to understand, the subtle body being a bit more subtle, a bit harder. The causal body is even more subtle and hence a slightly abstract concept to grasp. For now, if you're still trying to come to grips with understanding it, I would say for now it's good enough if you understand it, the causal body, as the potential seed form of the physical and the subtle body before creation. And the nearest experience or model of a causal body is when we are in the deep sleep state, where we are not aware of anything, you're not even aware of the fact that I am asleep. All these bodies have a different length of time they exist for. The physical body is for one janma, one birth, date of birth to date of death is its length of its existence. The subtle body is one shrishti, one cyclical creation. It goes into unmanifest state at the time of pralayam, and a new subtle body, or you can say the same subtle body comes, right? And the causal body continues in the seed form even after pralayam. So just like the farmers keep seeds for planting in the next season, Ishvara is an intelligent farmer who keeps these seeds for the next Shrishti. So what is it that exists? Only Atma exists, which the author told us is different from these three bodies. And it is the Sakshi or witness of the three states of experience. It is the invisible, immortal essence. So we will continue with the other classifications of an Atma if there's no further questions.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
The causal body is the one which the Atma carries from one lifetime to the other.
So causal body only has kind of a function to do at the time of Shrishti. It gives rise to all these different Sukshma Shareerams. And your causal body is also there across your births, across, across lifetimes, across Shrishtis. The karma itself is there in the Karana Shareeram, in the subtle body.
Okay.
But both, yes, you're right. Both causal body and subtle body stay with you across births. But the causal body doesn't have any function once it's given rise to other bodies.
So what we as humans experience is physical body and the subtle body, the thoughts, memories, and the
Correct.
things that we see.
Yeah, the only thing which is, so the causal body is not experienceable at all. It's kind of, like I said, the closest model would be the deep sleep state, because there is no differentiation. You cannot experience it. You can definitely experience the physical body. and you can experience the subtle body. You can experience your digestive fire, the thoughts which are happening in your mind and so on. Right, and an Ayurvedic doctor would be able to read your by your pulse, they'll be able to tell you the strength of your various pranas and so on. So it is partially observable.
Excuse me, Spandanaji.
Yes.
Does causal body have all our past karmas?
It's in a way, but it's the subtle body which keeps the karmas. But
Okay.
yeah, the causal body gives rise to the subtle body, which has this, stores the past karma.
Okay. Thank you, Spandanaji.
So I don't mind, it's actually just very little time to start the next topic, which is also a big topic. So if there's any other general questions, also we can take that, or we can maybe end the class a bit early today.
I have another question.
Yes, Neha.
So there are some people who have this ability to recall. How is it? Are they able to experience that causal body of theirs?
They have some ability to recall what, sorry?
Their past lives.
Uh-huh.
Are they able to experience?
So there are many yogic abilities people get, right? So all this to say, so we said we all have a limited power of something. So, right, so we have a limited power of hearing, we have a limited power of sight. And we said the absolute power of all this exists, we call them devatas. So when some people, either through yogic practices or naturally, sometimes it happens, when they develop this extra sensory perceptions, these siddhis, it's called. Siddhis are well documented in yoga, right, where people are able to do astral travel, or they're able to read other people's mind. They can know events of the past or future and so on. These can all be different siddhis, which come up because the potential exists, right? So like I said, your subtle, and you're right, maybe it has something to do with the subtle body, because your subtle body survives with you beyond this particular lifetime, across several lifetimes. So it's the storehouse of your karma, of your memories, and so on. So if you're recalling something from past life, it could be because that memory exists with you, which is something which says you're not just who you think you are in this lifetime, right? And the thing to take away from that is that the Vedantic concept to take away from that is that you're not just this body and association you have right now. And that realization does not need to happen by experiencing past life memory or anything like that. That realization can happen right now. So all these various siddhis also, people, there are many yogis in deep tapas who can generate all these siddhis, but they can be completely ignorant. There might be a very evolved yogi who can do astral travel even, but they can be completely ignorant about their true nature. So, and hence, they can still be subject to suffering. So, when this moksha, this liberation, what does it look like? The Vedantic version of liberation is nothing fancy. The person serving you chai could be liberated, and you might not exhibit any kind of abilities, right? But he could be completely filled with bliss. That's moksha. All these siddhis, the yogic texts also warn you that the siddhis, like, seeing past life or, all these other things, can be a hindrance in your journey at some point, in the sense that it is something you do not become attached to. You have to overcome that too, right? Because it has the capacity to make your ahamkara even bigger. So instead of just associating with this body and what I do in this life, you can also get associated with these supernatural powers you have and such. So if any siddhis do come up, it's an obstacle to overcome. So there is one text, I forget which talks about siddhis as perhaps, a point which could happen, and then it becomes something which the yogi needs to overcome to progress further in the spiritual journey. But it's neither a necessary condition nor a sufficient condition for moksha.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you. So we will do the closing prayers. I can't find it right now. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Tat Sat. Thank you. Have a beautiful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.